Oliver Quinn couldn't believe he'd agreed to this. The last place the CEO of Quinn Marine Logistics wanted to be on a Friday evening was at his college friend's cousin's wedding, surrounded by strangers and forced small talk. Yet here he was, adjusting his tie in the hotel elevator, mentally rehearsing excuses to leave early. "You're overthinking this," said Marcus, his best friend since their Yale days. "Just be charming for a few hours, eat some cake, maybe dance once or twice." "I promised Catherine I wouldn't show up alone again." Oliver ran a hand through his dark hair. At 35, he'd built a global shipping empire from his grandfather's modest local operation, negotiated billion-dollar contracts with ease, but somehow the thought of being someone's plus one at a wedding filled him with dread. "Remind me why I agreed to this again," Marcus grinned. "Because I covered for you when you disappeared with Professor Hendrick's daughter during graduation. That was 15 years ago," Oliver grumbled, "and I've been saving it for something important." The elevator doors opened to the hotel's grand ballroom foyer. "Besides, you need to get out more." "All you do is work." Oliver couldn't argue with that. The past 3 years had been consumed with expanding Quinn Marine into Asian markets, leaving little time for anything resembling a personal life. They entered the reception, a tastefully decorated affair with cream and gold accents. Marcus immediately spotted Catherine and waved, leading Oliver through the crowd. That's when he saw her. She was standing near the cake table, wearing a burgundy dress that complemented her olive skin perfectly. She was laughing at something the bride was saying, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Something about the genuine joy on her face made Oliver stop in his tracks. "Who is that?" he asked before he could stop himself. Marcus followed his gaze. "Julia Owens, she's the wedding coordinator, also happens to be Catherine's roommate from college, Julia." The name suited her. "Come on," Marcus said, pulling Oliver toward the women. "I'll introduce you." As they approached, Julia turned, and Oliver felt something he hadn't experienced in years, an immediate, undeniable connection. Her eyes were a deep amber color, intelligent and warm. "Marcus," she exclaimed, giving his friend a quick hug. "I'm so glad you could make it. Catherine was worried you'd back out." "And miss the event of the season?" "Never," Marcus replied. "Julia, this is my friend Oliver Quinn." "Oliver Julia Owens." "The reluctant plus one," Julia said with a knowing smile, extending her hand. Catherine mentioned Marcus was bringing reinforcements. Her handshake was firm, confident. Up close, Oliver noticed the light dusting of freckles across her nose, the way her dark hair fell in soft waves to her shoulders. "Guilty as charged," he admitted. "Though I'm already finding the evening more interesting than expected." Was he flirting? Oliver Quinn didn't flirt. He negotiated, strategized, closed deals. Yet here he was, feeling like a college freshman again. "Well, Mr. Quinn, as the official wedding coordinator, it's my job to make sure everyone enjoys themselves, even the reluctant guests." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Even CEOs of shipping companies who'd rather be reviewing quarterly reports." Oliver raised an eyebrow. "You've done your homework." "Catherine mentioned you run Quinn Marine. I looked it up." She shrugged unapologetically. "I like to know who's at my events." Before he could respond, Julia's attention was called away by a server with a question about the dinner service. She excused herself with an apologetic smile, promising to catch up with them later. "Well, that was interesting," Marcus said, nudging Oliver as they walked toward their table. "What was?" you, smiling, making conversation that wasn't about shipping containers or profit margins. Oliver rolled his eyes. "I'm perfectly capable of normal human interaction." "With Julia, apparently." Marcus's grin widened. "I've known you since we were 18, and I've never seen you look at someone the way you just looked at her." "I met her 30 seconds ago," Oliver protested. But throughout dinner, he found himself watching Julia as she moved effortlessly around the reception, solving problems before they became issues, making sure everything ran smoothly. There was something about her efficiency combined with her genuine warmth that fascinated him. When she wasn't managing the event, she was connecting with guests, remembering names, making everyone feel welcome. After the main course, when the dance floor opened, Oliver found himself walking toward her before he could think better of it. She was standing by the DJ booth, clipboard in hand, checking off items on her list. Do wedding coordinators ever get to enjoy the celebrations they create? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Julia looked up, surprised. Mr. Quinn, enjoying yourself after all, Oliver, please. And yes, though I've noticed you haven't had a moment to sit down or even eat, she laughed. Occupational hazard. The job's not done until the last guest leaves. Then I won't ask you to dance, he said, but I could bring you a plate from the buffet. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, that he'd noticed her needs when most guests barely registered her presence. That's very thoughtful. I wouldn't say no to some of that salmon and maybe a bit of the roasted vegetables. When Oliver returned with a carefully prepared plate, Julia had cleared a small spot at an empty table in the corner. Your dinner, madam, he said, setting it before her with a flourish. My hero, she replied, genuinely grateful. You didn't have to do this. It seemed like the least I could do for the person making sure everyone else has a perfect evening. He sat across from her. How did you get into wedding planning? Julia took a bite of salmon before answering. It wasn't my original plan. I studied art history, actually. Wanted to work in museums. What changed? Life, she said with a small shrug. My mom got sick my senior year of college. Moving back home to help care for her meant taking whatever work I could find locally. A friend was getting married, couldn't afford a planner, so I stepped in. Turned out I had a knack for it. And now I run my own event planning business, weddings, corporate events, fundraisers. She gave him a curious look. But you must know all about changing course. Quinn Marine wasn't always the global presence it is today. Oliver was impressed. Most people he met at social events either knew nothing about his company or pretended to know more than they did. My grandfather started with 2 tugboats in Boston Harbor, he confirmed. My father expanded to the East Coast. I took things international. That's quite a legacy, Julia said. Then, with a directness that caught him off guard, is it what you always wanted to do? No one asked him that. Ever. The assumption was always that, of course, he'd wanted to take over the family business, expand it, make it his own. I actually wanted to be an architect, he admitted, surprising himself with the confession. I used to draw building designs constantly as a kid. Julia's eyes lit up. That explains why you were examining the structural details of the ballroom earlier. I saw you looking up at the coffered ceiling when you first arrived. The fact that she'd noticed both surprised and pleased him. Busted, he said with a smile. Old habits. Why didn't you pursue it? Oliver considered the question. Family expectations, mostly. My father had a heart attack when I was in my 2nd year of college. I switched from architecture to business and never looked back. Do you regret it? No, he said, realizing it was true. I love what I've built with Quinn Marine, but sometimes I wonder about the road not taken. Their conversation was interrupted by the wedding planner's earpiece crackling to life. Cake cutting in 5, came a voice, and Julia sighed. Duty calls, she said, rising. Thank you for the dinner rescue, Oliver. It was nice talking with you. The pleasure was mine, he replied, meaning it. Throughout the rest of the evening, they kept finding themselves in each other's orbit. After the cake cutting, Oliver helped Julia move some flower arrangements that had been placed too close to the dance floor. Later, when she was struggling to reach a streamer that had come loose from the ceiling, he appeared at her side with his 6'3" frame to easily solve the problem. By the end of the night, as the last guests were leaving, Julia found Oliver waiting by the exit. Don't tell me Marcus abandoned you, she said, tucking her clipboard under her arm. I told him to go ahead. I thought you might need a ride home. He hesitated. Unless that's completely inappropriate and I've misread the entire evening. Julia studied him for a moment. You haven't misread anything, but I have to oversee breakdown and make sure everything's packed up properly. It could be another hour. I don't mind waiting, she tilted her head. Why? Oliver considered giving a glib answer but opted for honesty instead. Because talking with you has been the highlight of my week, possibly my month, and I'm not ready for it to end yet. A smile spread across Julia's face, genuine and unguarded. In that case, you can help me supervise the vendor cleanup. I'll even let you move some heavy objects if you're feeling particularly chivalrous. Deal, he said, removing his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. For the next hour, Oliver got a behind-the-scenes look at what breaking down a wedding reception entailed. Julia was in her element directing staff, checking details, making sure rentals were properly accounted for. She was thorough but kind, thanking each worker individually for their efforts. When everything was finally done, Julia's shoulders sagged slightly with exhaustion. "Ready to get out of here?" Oliver asked. She nodded. "More than ready." In the car, Julia directed him to her apartment in Cambridge. The late-night drive was peaceful, with minimal traffic. They talked easily about the wedding, about Boston, about their favorite places in the city. When they reached her building, Oliver walked her to her door. "Thank you for the ride," Julia said, keys in hand. "And for all your help tonight. Thank you for making a wedding I was dreading attending turn into an unexpectedly wonderful evening." She smiled up at him. It was nice to meet someone who notices the person making things happen instead of just enjoying the results. Oliver took a breath. "I'd like to see you again, properly, not as someone's +1 or as a wedding guest." "I'd like that too," she said without hesitation. They exchanged numbers, and Oliver found himself driving home with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Something about Julia felt familiar, comfortable, yet exciting at the same time. He realized, with some surprise, that he didn't want to wait the customary few days to call her. The next morning he texted her. "Breakfast? I know a place with the best blueberry pancakes in Boston." Her reply came quickly. "Tempting. Where and when?" They met at a small cafe in Back Bay, and over coffee and those promised pancakes, which lived up to the hype. Conversation flowed as easily as it had the night before. Julia wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked just as beautiful as she had in her formal dress at the wedding. "So," she said, after they'd covered topics ranging from favorite books to travel disasters, "tell me more about Quinn Marine. What does a shipping magnate do on a typical day?" Oliver laughed. "Hardly a magnate. Though don't tell my competitors I said that. Your secret's safe with me." He told her about his company's focus on sustainable shipping practices, the challenges of managing a global fleet, his plans to expand their European operations. "What about you?" he asked. "What does Owen's Events have in store for the future?" Julia's eyes lit up. "I'm working on expanding into more corporate and nonprofit events. Weddings are wonderful, but I want to do more work with organizations making a difference." "Any organizations in particular?" "There's an environmental nonprofit focused on ocean conservation I'd love to work with," she admitted. "But they're pretty high profile. I need to build my corporate portfolio first." Oliver felt a spark of excitement. "Quinn Marine has a partnership with Ocean Guardian. We fund several of their initiatives. They're having their annual fundraising gala in 2 months." "I know," Julia said, eyes widening. "It's one of the biggest environmental fundraisers in New England. Their event planner just went on maternity leave. They're scrambling to find a replacement." Julia set down her coffee cup. "Are you serious?" Completely. "Would you be interested in an introduction?" She looked at him suspiciously. "I don't need charity, Oliver. I want to earn opportunities on my own merit." "It's not charity," he assured her. "It's networking. I'd make the introduction, but you'd have to impress them on your own. And believe me, they have high standards. I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't think you were qualified." Julia considered this. "Okay, an introduction would be appreciated, thank you." Their breakfast extended into a walk along the Charles River, which turned into lunch, which somehow became an impromptu visit to the Museum of Fine Arts when Julia mentioned she hadn't been in ages. As they stood before a Monet painting, Julia explained the techniques used, the historical context, her voice animated with passion for the subject. Oliver found himself watching her more than the artwork, captivated by her knowledge and enthusiasm. "Sorry," she said, catching his gaze. "I tend to get carried away with art history." "Don't apologize," he said. "It's refreshing to hear someone talk about something they love." "What do you love, Oliver Quinn? Besides ships and logistics, I mean," he thought for a moment, "the ocean, being on or near water, good books." "Well-designed buildings," he paused, "and breakfast with intriguing wedding coordinators, apparently." Julia smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Smooth talker." "Not usually," he admitted. "I'm generally known for being rather direct and businesslike." "So I'm special," she teased. "Yes," he said simply. "You are." The week that followed was unlike any Oliver had experienced in years. Despite his packed schedule, board meetings, conference calls, strategic planning sessions, he found time for Julia. They met for coffee between her client meetings and his business lunches. They talked on the phone late into the night. He accompanied her on a venue scout for an upcoming corporate event, offering his perspective on the space from a client's viewpoint. True to his word, Oliver made the introduction to Ocean Guardian, and Julia secured an interview to discuss coordinating their annual gala. When she called him with the news that they'd hired her, the joy in her voice made his day. "They loved your portfolio," he told her when they met to celebrate over dinner, "and they were particularly impressed with your ideas for incorporating their conservation message throughout the event experience." "I still can't believe it," she said, eyes shining. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been working toward." Oliver raised his glass. "To new opportunities. And unexpected connections," she added, clinking her glass against his. As weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Julia met Marcus and Catherine for double dates. Oliver introduced her to his executive team at a company function. They discovered a shared love of old films, spicy food, and Sunday morning crossword puzzles. What surprised Oliver most was how naturally Julia fit into his life, and he into hers. There was none of the awkwardness he'd experienced in past relationships, no sense that he was sacrificing his work or that she was intimidated by his position. She understood his dedication to Quinn Marine because she approached her own business with the same commitment. 3 months after they met, Oliver invited Julia to accompany him on a business trip to Barcelona, where Quinn Marine was finalizing a deal with a Spanish shipping company. "I can't just drop everything and go to Spain," she protested, though he could see the temptation in her eyes. "Even event planners deserve vacations," he pointed out. "You've been working non-stop on the Ocean Guardian Gala. It's still 2 weeks away. Everything's under control, you said so yourself." "I've never been to Barcelona," she admitted. "The architecture alone is worth the trip," he said, knowing her weakness for beautiful buildings. "Gaudi's works are breathtaking in person," she laughed. "You fight dirty, Quinn." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." Barcelona exceeded all expectations. Oliver concluded his business in 2 efficient days, leaving them plenty of time to explore the city together. They wandered through the Gothic Quarter, visited Sagrada Familia, and ate tapas at tiny restaurants off the tourist path. On their last night, they had dinner on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. The sea breeze was warm, carrying the scent of salt and distant flowers. "I don't want to go back," Julia confessed, looking out at the water glittering under the moonlight. "We could stay," Oliver suggested, only half joking. "I could run Quinn Marine remotely. You could plan Mediterranean weddings." She laughed, but then grew thoughtful. "It's not really about being here, though, is it? It's about being away from the daily grind. Having time together without 20 other commitments pulling us in different directions." Oliver reached across the table to take her hand. "We need to make more time for this for us even when we're back home." "Agreed," she said, squeezing his hand. "Though I warn you, the 2 weeks before the gala are going to be insane." "I'll bring you coffee and make sure you eat actual meals," he promised. Julia looked at him with such warmth that something in Oliver's chest tightened. "You're not what I expected, Oliver Quinn." "What did you expect?" When Catherine told me Marcus was bringing his CEO friend to the wedding, I expected someone self-important, too busy checking emails to notice what was happening around him. She traced circles on the back of his hand with her thumb. Instead, I got someone who noticed I hadn't eaten dinner and brought me a plate of food. You were working so hard to make everyone else's experience perfect, he said. Someone needed to look out for you. Julia's eyes shimmered in the candlelight. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Oliver felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost overwhelmed him. I know I'm in love with you, he replied, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. I think I started falling that first night at the wedding, and I haven't stopped since. They returned to Boston closer than ever, though as predicted, the final preparations for the Ocean Guardian Gala consumed much of Julia's time and attention. Oliver kept his promise, showing up at her office with dinner when she worked late, offering a sounding board when she needed to work through logistical challenges. The night of the gala arrived and Julia was a vision of controlled energy, elegant in a deep blue gown but constantly in motion, checking details, coordinating staff, solving last-minute problems. Oliver attended as a major donor to Ocean Guardian, but he took immense pride in watching Julia in her element, creating an experience that had the organization's wealthiest supporters reaching for their checkbooks. By the end of the night, Ocean Guardian had raised a record amount for their conservation projects, and the executive director was already talking to Julia about next year's event. You were extraordinary, Oliver told her as they finally left the venue, exhausted but triumphant. Everyone was impressed, and they should be. You transformed that space into an underwater wonderland. Julia leaned against him as they waited for the valet to bring his car. I had a good feeling about tonight, but I never expected it to go this well. 3 new corporate clients asked for my card. Owens Events is about to become the most sought-after planning company in Boston, he said, kissing the top of her head. I couldn't have done it without your help, she said. The introduction to Ocean Guardian changed everything. You did all the hard work, he insisted. I just opened a door. You walked through it and conquered the room. The next morning, Oliver woke early, watching Julia sleep beside him in the soft morning light filtering through the curtains of his penthouse apartment. In the 6 months since Marcus had dragged him to that wedding, his life had transformed in ways he never could have anticipated. Julia stirred, opening her eyes slowly. You're staring, she murmured. Admiring, he corrected, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She smiled sleepily. What time is it? Early, go back to sleep. Instead, she propped herself up on one elbow. You have your thinking face on. What's going on in that head of yours? Oliver traced the line of her jaw with his finger. I was thinking about home. Missing Barcelona already, he shook his head. No, I was thinking about how my whole adult life home has been a place. My apartment, the Quinn Marine offices, even my grandfather's house on Cape Cod. But lately I've realized home isn't a place for me anymore. Julia watched him, waiting. It's you, he said simply. You're my home, Julia. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be, her eyes filled with tears. Oliver. I'm not proposing, he clarified quickly. Not yet. I think we need more time before that step, but I wanted you to know how I feel, how important you are to me. She leaned forward to kiss him softly. You're my home too, and when you do decide to propose, my answer will be yes. Good to know, he said, smiling against her lips. A year later, on the anniversary of the wedding where they'd met, Oliver did propose at the same hotel in the same ballroom which he'd rented for the occasion. Julia said yes, just as she'd promised she would. They were married the following spring on his grandfather's property on Cape Cod with the Atlantic Ocean as their backdrop. Marcus served as best man, Catherine as maid of honor. Julia had insisted on planning much of the wedding herself, despite Oliver's protests that she should be able to enjoy her own wedding without working. But I love what I do, she told him, and planning our day together is a joy, not a job. They compromised by hiring another planner to handle the day of coordination, allowing Julia to fully experience the celebration. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Oliver held Julia close, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely," she replied. "Though I'm already thinking about the Ocean Guardian Gala next month, we need to finalize the—" Oliver silenced her with a kiss. "No work talk, not today," she laughed. "Sorry, force of habit. We have our whole lives to talk about work," he reminded her. "Right now, I just want to dance with my wife." And so they danced, surrounded by friends and family, the ocean breeze carrying the promise of their future together. Oliver thought about how reluctant he'd been to attend that wedding a year ago, how close he'd come to missing the chance to meet the woman who had become his everything. Life had a way of delivering unexpected gifts, he reflected. Sometimes they came wrapped in burgundy dresses with clipboards in hand, offering a plate of food to the man who'd brought her dinner. Sometimes they felt like coming home, even when you hadn't known you were looking for one. In the years that followed, Quinn Marine continued to grow, expanding its sustainable shipping initiatives worldwide. Owens Events, which remained Owens rather than Quinn by Julia's choice, "I built this business. I'm keeping my name on it," became Boston's premier event planning company, known for innovative design and flawless execution. They welcomed twin daughters, Sophia and Emma, who grew up with their mother's artistic eye and their father's love of building things. Family vacations often involved boats, museums, and architectural tours that somehow managed to delight everyone. And on their 10th anniversary, when Oliver surprised Julia with plans for their dream house, one he had designed himself, returning to his architectural roots, she cried looking at the blueprints. "You remembered everything," she said, tracing the art studio he'd included for her, the library they would share, the large kitchen for family gatherings. "Of course I did," he replied. "You're my home, Julia. I've been designing this in my head since the day I met you." "I love you, Oliver Quinn," she said, the words as true and meaningful as they'd been in Barcelona years ago. "And I love you," he answered, pulling her close. +1 business partner, mother of my children, love of my life. From reluctant wedding guest to husband, father, and happier man than he'd ever imagined possible, Oliver's journey had been unexpected, but perfect in every way that mattered. All because he'd agreed to be a friends +1, and found, in the woman coordinating the festivities, the home his heart had always been searching for.